Welcome to today's edition of the Rush 24/7 podcast.
Man, I don't know about you folks, but as I look at the news every day and as I study it and as I prep the program, you know what I give thanks for? Every day is that I am not in the news. What an absolute cesspool the news is. It is a cesspool. And yet, we wade around in it each and every day here at the EIB Network. Great to have you, my friends. We're going to do Open Line Friday or Wednesday today.
Live from the Southern Command in sunny South Florida, it's Open Line Friday.
Because of the Thanksgiving holiday, we'll not be here on Friday. Who did you say is going to... That's right, Ken Matthews of the NSA will be here on Friday, guest hosting. So the rules are whatever you want to talk about, have at it. No restrictions in terms of what you can normally Monday through Friday, Monday through Thursday. Callers have to talk about things I care about or am interested in. But that's not going to be the case today. It can be anything. Have at it. 800-282-2882. The email address, lrushbo@eibnet.us. A tradition on this program, the real story of Thanksgiving. We will share it with you yet again. This has been a tradition since my first book, The Way Things Ought to Be, rather. And it's especially relevant now since the original Thanksgiving is so misunderstood and as much of education is mistaught. And actually, young people lied to about much of the founding of our country. And so our tradition is to set it straight each and every day here. We also have the spectacle, the New York Times. You know, the New York Times is a Bible to the American left. It's a Bible to the journalism community. It's a Bible to young millennial journalists. And the New York Times has published two stories recently which, you know, I know who the Times is. I know what they do. I know they're radical leftists. I know they're not any longer mainstream leftists, but there are two stories here, two columns, two op-eds, and one of them, I really don't know how this one passed muster. It is a column from an educated individual claiming that Charles Manson is the intellectual energy and creator behind the modern conservative movement. Charles Manson was the godfather of Ronald Reagan. Charles Manson was the inspiration for modern-day conservatism. You know why? Because what Manson was really doing back in 1969 when he started killing rich white people was to inspire. He wanted to create a race war. Because Charles Manson didn't like African Americans. He was a racist, they say. And that is the linkage. And the New York Times publishes an op-ed from a fool making this point. Now, the problem is that the New York Times readership is a bunch of sponges. And they're going to soak this up, and they're going to be running around thinking that they're now enlightened and they've learned something. And then there was another piece that ran this week claiming this is not a new thought. Now, this one does not surprise me they would run, but we're going to dissect both of these. Capitalism is the threat to the world and must be replaced. Capitalism is the reason everything in the world that's wrong is wrong. Everything bad is bad because of capitalism. And the column makes the point that capitalism is exclusively why we are losing the planet to climate change. And the only solution to saving the planet is to eliminate capitalism and immediately swerve to democratic socialism. So I'm going to be taking yet another opportunity today to explain why socialism always ends up as dictatorship. Why socialism always ends up being communism. Why socialism ends up with people living in tyranny despite the dreams and the desires of the democratic socialists to create a utopia. There's a very simple reason why socialism ends up as a tyranny. There's a reason why socialism ends up having to build walls around countries to keep people in. It's a very simple explanation. I'll just give you a hint. With socialism, the only opportunity to acquire any kind of power and any kind of wealth is in the government. Because under democratic socialism, everybody else is quote-unquote equal. And in the case of socialism, it's equally miserable. Nothing is allowed, no differences, no wealth, no prosperity is allowed in the general population under socialism. Somehow that equals utopia. But human nature is human nature. Human beings want wealth. They want better lifestyles. And human nature is undeniable characteristic of, or has an undeniable characteristic of people pursuing power. And under socialism, the only place anybody can go to acquire wealth and power is the government. And once you get there and you start utilizing the government to enrich yourself and to empower yourself, well, that's when you start doing mean and bad things to everybody else in the general population. And that is why there is no socialist utopia. It is why there never has been. It's why there never will be. I don't care what the dreams and desires are, but yet here's the New York Times with yet another op-ed in a period of time. I don't know how many op-eds like this they have run. The problem in the world is capitalism. The problem with climate change is capitalism. The problem with illegal immigration is capital. Whatever the problem, capitalism is the root of all evil and must be eradicated. But this piece crediting Charles Manson for being the intellectual inspiration and motivation for modern-day conservatism. How does that pass the editorial board, the op-ed page at the New York Times? It's because somebody wants that story to run. And the reason they would want that story to run is because they are obsessed and consumed by sheer, utter hatred. The American left today and the Democrat Party is the largest hate group in America. And if you look out over the news today, as I just did, and you see nothing but a cesspool and you give thanks that you're not in it, the rage and the anger, the discontent, the absence of happiness, all are characteristics of modern-day liberals. Here's a piece from GQ, Gentleman's Quarterly. They just put Colin Kaepernick on their cover as Citizen of the Year. A guy who's never voted has become Citizen of the Year at GQ, a supposed men's fashion magazine. In fact, the way to lead into this is to share with you a tweet from Chuck Schumer. We were talking about this earlier this week. In years past, on Thanksgiving, Obama and the Democrats have always urged you to talk politics at Thanksgiving dinner. Obama ran ads. Remember, the Pajama Boy series of ads was actually an Obama administration production designed to get you to start selling Obamacare over the Thanksgiving holiday to your friends and family gathered for Thanksgiving dinner. Obama urged this. This year, a bunch of leftists have come forth and said, you know what, let's not talk politics this year because they're losing, folks. They think they're in trouble. There's not a whole lot going on politically they want you to talk about. They've got some things. They think they're going to run the floor with, run the table with Roy Moore and all this. But there's a huge level of discontent on the left, but it's not universal. There's a tweet here from Chuck Schumer. Bring this chart to Thanksgiving dinner. It'll come in handy when that family member who always talks politics tells you the Republican tax bill helps the middle class. And he's got a chart here from the Joint Committee on Taxation, which is a bunch of caca, showing that the Republican tax bill, House and Senate version, only cut taxes for the wealthiest Americans. It's nowhere near the case. The wealthiest Americans are not going to get a tax cut. Well, they're not going to get a rate reduction. In fact, they're going to pay a special rate of 46% in order to make sure they don't get a tax rate reduction. But anyway, how the leftists ruin Thanksgiving, how they seek to ruin Thanksgiving. So here's Chuck Schumer printing out a chart in a tweet. You're supposed to print it out, take it with you to Thanksgiving dinner, and provoke an argument among any Republicans at your Thanksgiving dinner, and then throw this chart in their face to show them how wrong they are and how the Republican tax reform bill is only going to benefit the rich. And then the GQ story, the headline, "It is your civic duty to ruin Thanksgiving by bringing up Trump. This Turkey Day, consider making life hell for a few of your relatives." It's late November 2017, and you know what that means. Every man you've ever seen on TV for any reason has just been unmasked as a woman-hating ghoul. Also, it's time to ruin your Trump-supported family's Thanksgiving for America. Thanksgiving's a celebration of community and gratitude, where we reconvene in our nostalgia-drenched hometowns and perform time-honored traditions such as almost sleeping with your high school crush and going around the table to say what you're most thankful for and where you were on 9/11. It goes on and on to talk about what happens at Thanksgiving dinner, and then offers a few suggestions for how to ruin Thanksgiving. One, don't show up. For some parents, your absence will speak louder than any sodden arguments over the density of pumpkin pie. Anyway, I could go through the details, but the point is made. In fact, you have a civic duty to ruin Thanksgiving by bringing up Donald Trump and whatever else. Let me take a brief timeout. We'll come back. And, of course, the left is just in a tizzy over the fact that Donald Trump has essentially endorsed Roy Moore in Alabama. So a lot going on today as we get you into the official Thanksgiving holiday weekend here on the EIB Network. Hang in and don't go away, folks. We'll be right back. I'm not going to bother showing you the chart from Chuck Schumer on the Ditto-Cam. I'm not going to take the time and go to the trouble. I just want you to understand that it is a total lie. The way Schumer and the Democrats try to make their point with a chart that tax cuts are only going to benefit the rich, that there are no tax cuts for the middle class. The point of it is that the tax cuts are going to sunset in 10 years. The Republicans did that in order to make the budget neutral. It's a time-honored gimmick, and it's because of the way these things are scored by the various budget offices and so forth. They score these things in a static fashion. And so some of the tax cuts will sunset in 10 years. And because of that, Schumer's taking it. See, these are just nothing here for the middle class. It's a convoluted argument. The thing that you just have to realize is that no matter what is in a tax cut offered by the Republicans, the Democrats are going to demagogue it and say it's nothing but a tax cut for the rich and not for anybody else. But the chart that he has published here, just trust me on this, is a total lie. And the thing about socialism and capitalism, very easy to remember this, folks. We've observed this on many previous occasions. In capitalism, rich people become powerful. In capitalism, middle-class people can become rich. In capitalism, middle-class people who become rich can then become powerful. In socialism, the powerful become rich. In socialism, the great middle class has no chance to become powerful or rich by design. And that leaves only one place for people to go to acquire power and to acquire money, and that is the government and us, and more importantly, running it, having control over it. And human nature being what it is why socialism always ends up being a tyranny. Now the New York Times piece on capitalism as the threat to the world, and it must be replaced. This is by somebody named Benjamin Fong. He's a professor at Arizona State University. He says capitalism is the problem. Environmentalism is the movement that can supersede it, proving a point that I've always made, that modern-day environmentalism is simply the new home of communism. When the state-sponsored communism of the Soviet Union imploded, there was a bunch of homelessness, if you will, among worldwide communists who loved and adored the Soviet Union. And environmentalism is right out of the pages of socialism and communism. And so environmentalism became the new home. It became the place for abandoned communists to go in order to have some relevance. And this proves it. Mr. Fong here unwittingly proves my point. Capitalism is the problem. Environmentalism is the movement that can supersede it. Well, the movement that's opposed to capitalism is communism, so there's his admission. But here's some of what he says in this piece. The real culprit of the climate crisis is not any particular form of consumption or production or regulation. Instead, it's the very way in which we globally produce, which is for profit rather than sustainability. So it's the old argument. This guy's got something up his craw. He's very upset that everybody out there producing and creating and moving and distributing is doing it for profit. And that makes it evil. And that makes it bad. And that makes it horrible. That makes it unequal. That makes it unfair. Instead, all of these producers and distributors and manufacturers should be doing it for one reason only: sustainability. Did I not tell you? Sustainability is the key word today in attracting millennials and other unsuspecting young people. Sustainable energy, sustainable incomes, sustainable health care, sustainable what? So this guy is saying that the real culprit of the climate crisis is the pursuit of profit rather than the pursuit of sustainability. So everybody involved ought to just produce no more than what anybody needs, and you should pay no more than what it costs, and the producer should make no more than what it costs. And so there would essentially be no cost to anything. Everything's free. If you pay the producer exactly what it cost him to produce it, and you throw in the price of what it takes to distribute it, and if there's no profit, why then it's wonderful. And it's never ending. It's totally sustainable because there will not be any overproduction. There will not be any mining of minerals that will destroy the earth. There will not be any excesses of anything because we'll only need what we need, and we'll only produce what we need, and we'll only use what we need. If nobody makes any money, then it's a panacea. Of course, if nobody makes any money, then what's the motivation for this? What is the impetus? Why would anybody do it? And where does the original seed cost come from? I mean, you're going to produce product X. Somebody's going to have to make the investment in what's necessary to produce it or manufacture it. If you don't get paid until somebody buys it, and what guarantee is that somebody's going to buy it? How do you know how much to produce? And then how much do you know to buy so that everything zeroes out? It's absurd. But if you take profit out of it, you take motive, you take purpose, you take inspiration, you take out, you'll have no production to speak of. You'll have no distribution. Why do it? People are going to be working under the table in the black market trying to do things to make money. Human nature. So this clown, this Fong guy says, so long as this order is in place, the pursuit of profit instead of sustainability, the crisis will continue. And it will worsen. This is a hard fact to confront, he says, but averting our eyes from a seemingly intractable problem does not make it any less a problem. It should be stated plainly, it's capitalism that is at fault in destroying the planet. There's more, but I don't please don't ever forget this. Whenever you hear of any new proposal from the environmentalist wackos, United Nations, understand what it is. It is an attack on capitalism, and that means it is an attack on the United States. And that means it's an attack on all of us. It's a man, a legend, a way of life. Christmas bonuses to jump 66% to $1,797. People who will work. Sorry, folks, I've got all kinds of technical problems here. People who work will have, on average, an extra $716 to spend for Christmas. This is the latest sign of a booming economy. Paul Bedard has it, the Washington Examiner. Excuse me, human resources officers from some 500 companies are anticipating a massive 66% increase in cash Christmas bonuses. So what's happened here is that some survey firms have called various businesses. You're planning on bonusing your employees? Yeah, how much? And they give them the figure, and so the figure is averaged, and that's where the $1,797 figure comes from. Not saying that you are automatically going to get a bonus. This is an average based on companies that have been talked to, and it's, let's see, how many? 500. 500 corporations anticipating this increase. 39% of companies plan to give employees other perks throughout the year instead of a bonus. 38% will give charity. When is the last time you saw a story like this? When is the last time we saw a story on the economy booming, unemployment coming down, wages increasing, and bonuses? Do you remember any kind of stories like this during, say, the 7 or 8 years of Obama? I frankly don't. There weren't any stories. During the 7 or 8 years of Obama, well, it was 8, during the 8 years of Obama, we were told that there's a new normal, that we had seen our salad days, that we've peaked, and that now the new objective was to manage the new America, a more realistic America, an America not as prosperous and therefore not as injurious to other nations in the world. We were told to manage the decline, or we were told the decline was being managed, and that what was the purpose of Obama and his administration. And you could chalk this up to all the other economic news now showing on the plus side, and there's a reason for it. It's Donald Trump and the stock market going nuts. The reason for it is Donald Trump. Donald Trump's an optimist. And if anybody would have a right not to be an optimist, it's Trump. If anybody had a right to be depressed and ticked off and angry and seething and plotting revenge each and every day, it would be Trump. He has been relentlessly assaulted, attacked, you name it, for over 2 years, 2.5 years, and consistently every day with lies and distortions. I mean, the entire apparatus of the Washington establishment has been mobilized for 2 years. And yet, despite that, Trump remains optimistic and smiling, and he continues to fight back against these people to the point now where wages, increases, Christmas bonuses, economic growth, 3% or more, is routinely talked about. So in that context, I guess it doesn't surprise me the New York Times would be devoted here to running pieces, trying to destroy the concept of capitalism. I want to read this paragraph to you again and ask you a question. The real culprit of the climate crisis, and especially for you millennials out there, the day before Thanksgiving has always, on this program, has always sort of evolved into a day of lessons, historical remembrances, teaching, if you will. Now, I realize that there are many people, it's the fastest growing audience in American talk radio, and it's the largest, and there are people tuning in new every day, and we're getting from all demographics, all walks of life. By the way, this is the one program in America. If you are outside the 1849 demographic, we love you. Do you realize that in most of media, once you're past the 1849 debt, once you hit 50 or older, nobody cares about you. Advertisers don't care about you. Nobody cares about you because there's nothing they can sell you. You've already had your mind made up on pretty much everything you buy. Everybody associates youth with opportunity and potential and so forth. In the 18 to 49 demographic, I mean, after you surpass that, no matter where you are, nobody cares about you, but not true here. We think there are teachable moments for everybody. So let me read this graph again. The real culprit of the climate crisis is not any particular form of consumption. It's not the crisis or problem, any particular form of production or regulation, rather the way in which we globally produce, which is for profit rather than for sustainability. Now, how many of you think it's possible to produce only what we need that doesn't cost anybody anything and that the producers don't make any money? How many of you think that's possible? How many of you think that's desirable? I think young people think that sounds really cool. That's the essence of sustainability. It's really cool. Okay, now answer me this. What are you going to live on? Let's say you produce widgets, and you have to produce 2 million a year because that's how many are needed. So you produce the widgets, and then you sell them for exactly what it cost you to make them, which is fair, right? You're not earning any profit. You're being really nice. You're being fair, and you're really caring. How are you going to hire employees? What are you going to pay them with? And where do you get the money required to manufacture your widgets? If everything zeroes out, let me ask you this. You go to the butcher. Butcher is an example here because Adam Smith used it in his book. When you go to the butcher and you've got an array of choices in front of you, and wow, this is really cool. This is a great butcher. You think a butcher has put that array of things there for you? No. The butcher's in business for himself. The butcher is trying to sell you things that he thinks you want and things that you need, and he's trying to sell the best quality he can for a competitive price, but he's doing this for himself. This is called selfishness by people that don't understand it. Self-interest by those who do. The butcher is not trying to make sure you eat every day. The butcher is not trying to make sure you have healthy food in front of you. The butcher is trying to support himself. The great thing about it is that you benefit, too, in the process. Because if the butcher weren't doing that, what would you have to do? You'd have to head out to the wilderness and find a steer, and you'd have to kill it, and you'd have to dress it and prepare it, and you'd have to do everything the butcher does for you. The butcher saves you a lot of time. The butcher saves you a lot of trouble, and you are willing to pay for that. And the butcher makes a little profit so that he can buy some of his own stuff for his own family. And this is bare essence is the theory. But if there's no profit anywhere, if nobody makes any money as a result of what they do, let's say you're an employee and your business makes widgets and your business sells 2 million widgets. What do you get paid? And on what basis? Do you get paid only enough to where the employer doesn't have to lose money paying you to make the widgets? When everything zeroes out, you don't have sustainability. You have nothing. Because there's no reason for anybody to do anything. Yes, there is, Mr. Limbaugh, for the good of the community. Oh, really? I mean, everybody in a community is going to do what they're doing now. And they're going to sell what they sell now. They're going to make what they make now. They're going to produce what they produce now for no money. You're going to buy it for no more than what it costs. And everybody's going to be just hunky-dory happy at the end of every day when all of this commerce is gone. That's right. You've got it, Mr. Limbaugh. That's exactly right. Well, then what do you buy your house with? Or your apartment or your car? What do you buy that with? If there isn't profit, if there isn't a pool of money for people to chase, there's not going to be a reason that anything gets produced. What they want you to believe about capitalism, that everybody is in it, is a selfish rip-off artist. And all they're doing is overcharging you and selling you a bunch of inferior garbage. They're tricking you, they're lying to you, and they're getting rich off of you. And they've got piles of money in the back room that you never see because they don't share it with anybody. They're evil, and the bigger the business, the worse it is. And if you doubt me, just listen to the Democrat Party and its enemies list of corporations, and it's practically every one. It's a nice sounding thing, sustainability. Just produce things for what they cost and sell them for exactly what they cost, and it's just a beautiful thing. And then everything would be more affordable. But it wouldn't. There would be scarcity like you can't imagine. There would be people killing people to get things to eat. There would be people doing horrible things to one another in order to get food, shelter, you name it. No, Mr. Limbaugh, the government would provide all that. With what? Where's the government get its money? Well, the government has all the money. No, government doesn't. Government doesn't have a dime until it takes it from you. The government might sell weapons to Saudi Arabia for a profit. Can't do it for a profit. We have to sell weapons to Saudi Arabia for no more than what they cost us to make. Forgot that. There can't be any profit, because if there's profit, apparently there isn't any sustainability. Horrible. Next paragraph from this clown, Benjamin Fogg. The hope that we can empower intelligent people to positions where they can design the perfect set of regulations, or that we can rely on scientists to take the carbon out of the atmosphere and engineer sources of renewable energy, serves to cover over the simple fact that the work of saving the planet is political, not technical. We have a much better chance of making it past the 22nd century if environmental regulations are designed by a team of people with no formal education in a democrat socialist society than we do if they are made by a team of the most esteemed scientific luminaries in a capitalistic society. The intelligence of the brightest people around is no match for the rampant stupidity of capitalism. It's kind of a convoluted paragraph. But what the guy is saying is that there is no technical solution to climate change. It's political, and that means socialist, and that means progressive and liberal. We have to keep the capitalists, the technical people, out of it, because all they're going to care about is making a profit. This is so stupid. The United States is one of the least polluted places on the earth, and it is precisely the profit motive that has made that possible. Anyway, I'm a little long. I have to take a quick time out, but you get the drift. So the left is in panic city here. We had 8 years of Obama, and the 8 years of Obama was supposed to produce a utopia, at least a panacea. We're supposed to be on the road here to people being happier and more fulfilled, and there was going to be more equality, no racism, there wasn't going to be any sexism, no sexual harassment, no rape, no bigotry, and it all exploded, and there was worse incidents of that stuff during those 8 years. And we're only learning about it now. We didn't learn about it during the Obama years. We're learning about all these excesses now. There wasn't any economic growth, there wasn't any prosperity, there wasn't any advancing prosperity. So the left knows in their hearts, they may not have the guts to admit it, but they know what they believe in doesn't work. So they get angry. They lash out. They've been lashing out here, well, all of our lives, but intensely for the last 2.5 years. Okay, to the phones we go. This is Lori. Yep, Lori Davenport. Davenport, Florida. Where's Davenport, Florida, Lori? Lori, you there? Testing 1, 2. Just like a dead phone line. Where do you want to go next? That would be Frank in Phoenix. Frank, you're next. We'll give your phone line a shot. How are you doing, sir?
Hi, Rush. Very good. Long-time fan. Thank you.
I appreciate your call, sir. Thank you.
I just happened to run across an article about John Lasseter of Pixar and Disney. I guess he's head of animation at Disney now too. And the article says he's stepping away from his job, I guess leave of absence amid missteps. And I was reading the article, and I thought it was something to do with, financial and, maybe making some bad decisions financially with the company. And then you dig down deep, and it's really all about sexual harassment.
Well, that's what the missteps, that's what he meant, the missteps to define.
Yeah.
So your point is the media is really not divulging what Lasseter actually did. They're trying to make people think there were some financial improprieties. And
that's what I read when I heard
that. So you go to 6 months of financial rehab as opposed to sex rehab and then come back. John Lasseter is an artist. John Lasseter, founder of Pixar. Steve Jobs bought Pixar. Steve Jobs bought Pixar and then sold it to Disney. And Lasseter was the reason Jobs bought it. Lasseter, he's hands down one of the most innovative and creative animators going. His reputation is through the roof. I guess he has some executive experience being the founder and so forth. But this story is, as you say, 100% sexual harassment. And his missteps were the abuse and mistreatment of women. And he's going to get 6 months to straighten it out. He's going to take a leave of absence for 6 months. There would not be, I don't know if it's really true now, but back in the day, it would have been accurate to say there wouldn't be a Pixar without him. I mean, he is to animation what George Lucas was to the genre of movies. And you've never heard the name, right? Until this happened, you never heard the name John Lasseter. Well, he is to animation and the modern era of animation what George, I just said his name. George Lucas is to the sci-fi genre that is Star Wars and so forth. Huge. And so that's why they're going to give him 6 months instead of 30 days at the sex rehab clinic. He's got 6 months. The thing about this is Disney. Disney has, look at this. Damn it. Now I got it right in the middle of a slam dunk point, and here I got to take a break. I'm sorry. It is the fastest 3 hours in media. It's Rush Limbaugh. This is the day before Thanksgiving, which means the official story of Thanksgiving is written by me. One of my early books will be read before the program ends. I'm also thinking of reading George Washington's first Thanksgiving proclamation. And it might be a timely thing to do as well. Still deciding on that. Back here in just a second. Hi, folks, and welcome back. Great to have you here. It's Rush Limbaugh and the Excellence in Broadcasting Network. And the fastest 3 hours in media. On the day before Thanksgiving, you're over the river and through the woods. However you're getting where you're going, we are here to help you get there.
Live from the Southern Command in sunny South Florida, it's Open Line Friday.
800-282-2882 and the email address lrushbo@eibnet.us. New York Times op-ed, Charles Manson was a far right-wing ideologue. The New York Times published an op-ed yesterday suggesting that Charles Manson was the harbinger for alt-right and white supremacists. Manson's mission to convince a slew of hippies to go on a murdering spree in 1969 to kickstart a race war paved the way for today's right wing. This piece is written by somebody named Baynard Woods, B-A-Y-N-A-R-D, Baynard Woods. Now, this clown lives in Baltimore. He's the senior editor of something there called the City Paper. And he looks like a pajama boy in a fedora. There's a picture of him here. He has a Ph.D. in ancient philosophy. He writes librettos for rhymes with opera. And he preaches with the rock and roll band, the Barnyard Sharks. He's the author of some wacko books and so forth. But he's basically just an academic in Baltimore, and he claims that it is Manson, because what Manson's original purpose was to kick off a race war. Manson supposedly didn't like blacks, so he thought that he could kick off a race war by murdering rich white people in the Hollywood area and somehow making it look like blacks did it and kick off a race war. And Manson is credited by this guy for ideologically energizing the John Birch Society. He believes that Manson was not so much the end of the hippie generation as much as he was the start of modern right-wing conservatism. And this gets published in the New York Times. Now, I know it's an op-ed, but somebody on the op-ed page, the editor there, has to look at this and pass muster on it. Charles Manson has served a life sentence. He would have been put to death, except the state of California got rid of the death penalty right around the time he was being sentenced. He was a lunatic, certifiably insane. Yet the left was fascinated with this guy. If anybody was fascinated with Manson, it was the left. The left are the one that made movies about the guy. The left are the ones that wrote books about the guy. Helter Skelter, Vincent Bugliosi. These guys are famous left-wing radicals or Democrats, mainstream Democrats. They're fascinated with this guy. Why would he do it? What made him tick? What was it about Manson? It was almost like a romantic notion they had with this guy. TV journalists of the era reveled in the fact that they once interviewed Manson. Even the police department, the LAPD back then, had elements of the department that were almost groupie-like toward Manson before all of the violence began. Before the violence began, he was just a well-known ragtag sponge. The guy sponged off everybody. He had a Svengali effect, particularly on young women. Do you remember the name Squeaky Fromm? What did Squeaky Fromm do? Where? Was it San Francisco? Lynette Squeaky Fromm was one of Charles Manson's acolytes, lived in the commune. They were just a bunch of filthy human debris, folks, and yet the left is fascinated by this guy. They've written books about him. They've done movies about it. To us, he's just full-fledged human debris and not worthy of another moment's notice. The left has kept this guy alive. Every parole hearing, the drive-bys would get together and wonder if there's any way Manson could somehow be released. It was a morbid fascination with this guy. And he'd come along now in the New York Times and claim that this guy is the reason I think what I think, and you think what you think. And this guy, Charles Manson, was the harbinger of modern-day conservatism. Why? Because this lunatic, Baynard, whatever his name is, thinks that modern-day conservatism is nothing more than racism, that modern-day conservatives are the modern-day equivalent of the Ku Klux Klan, forgetting that the Klan was the military wing of the Democrat Party. Folks, we're playing for keeps here is the point. The New York Times is a Bible. There are lots of young people reading this, seeing this. It's going to be amplified. Lots of people reading this garbage, and they're going to believe it. They're young. They're impressionable. They're not yet old enough to have been sufficiently educated. And by the way, have you seen the surveys of millennials that say well over 50% of them think socialism is wonderful and preferable precisely because to them it's been pitched as sustainable? And let me give you a manifestation of this. Fox News, the headline, Girl Scouts tells parents not to force daughters to hug relatives over the holidays. Now, you're probably saying, wait, what? That headline didn't make any sense. I know, but I read it verbatim. The Girl Scouts of the USA, maybe they're just miffed that the Boy Scouts has decided to admit girls. The Girl Scouts of America has issued an odd warning to parents for the upcoming holidays, cautioning parents not to force their daughters to give relatives hugs or kisses and to offer instead the alternative of less personal kinds of touching. Now, while a directive to withhold affection from one's family may sound like an overreach, the Girl Scouts explained in a public service announcement on their official website that, quote, telling your child that she owes someone a hug, either just because she hasn't seen this person in a while or because they gave her a gift, can set the stage for your little girl questioning whether she owes another person any type of physical affection when they've bought her dinner or done something else seemingly nice for her later in life. Do you follow this now? The Girl Scouts of America is urging family members not to have their little girls hug other family members over the holidays, because this can eventually lead to sexual harassment and rape, is what they're getting at. If you condition your daughter to hug Uncle Fred after Uncle Fred gives her a Barbie doll, then you are conditioning your daughter to go out and hug Mr. X, who might give her a gift. And Mr. X might then expect to be hugged. And Mr. X might just give the gift or buy your daughter dinner in hopes of having her hug him or more. And so to guard against creating this reaction in your daughter, tell your daughter to hug nobody. Hugging a family member as gratitude or greeting can lead to unwanted sexual advances later in life. Now, notwithstanding that some families have reprobates in them, the point here is, well, come on. I mean, everybody knows that. What they're trying to do now is convince you that your family life and the way you are raising your daughter can make her susceptible to future acts of sexism, sexual harassment, or even rape. And the way to stop this dead in its tracks is to make sure your little girl hugs nobody over the holidays. Girl Scouts of America. It's not the New York Times saying it. It's not some left-wing politician. This is the Girl Scouts of America. We are now supposed to believe young girls are in danger of being molested by their relatives right in front of their parents. Or we are now being led to believe that young girls being hugged by their relatives sets the stage for young girls unknowingly sending a signal that somebody else could hug them. The Girl Scouts of America, which aims to build courage, confidence, and character in young girls, further elaborated on how parents can help daughters navigate social situations this holiday season, recommending alternatives to kissing and hugging that include a high five or a thank you with a smile or a fist bump. So instead of hugging, high five, thank you with a smile, or fist bump. But no hugging. The Nation, the far, far fringe left wacko news publication, suggests, do you know the Washington Redskins are hosting one of the Thanksgiving football games in the NFL? The Nation believes that the Redskins hosting a Thanksgiving Day game is the owners of the NFL showing their true racist, anti-Indian feelings. But these people, they're incapable of being happiness. They have to find some sort of ism in everything, even if it's harmless and good. What fans ought to be most concerned about is the Redskins aren't going anywhere. The game isn't going to mean anything. Who are the Redskins even playing? And who is the? It's the Thursday night game. NBC has it. And I knew it's off the top of my head, but the NFL purposely scheduled the Redskins on Thanksgiving night because we all know, we all Oh, that's right. The Giants. I mean, what a dud. That's, if anybody ought to be upset, it's a dud game in prime time on Thanksgiving. Of course, when the schedule makers put it together, they didn't know that the Giants were going to be pathetic and the Redskins were not going to be that much better. But for crying out loud. So this sends a signal, the NFL is exemplifying how we mistreated the Indians at Thanksgiving, because that's what they think Thanksgiving was. The Indians saved us. Without the Indians, we wouldn't be here. And what we turn around and do, we screwed them out of Manhattan, and we didn't feed them, and we put them on reservations, and we turn them into alcoholics. And so now here comes the NFL hammering that even further by making the Redskins play on Thanksgiving night. This is your normal thought process on display by your average, ordinary, run-of-the-mill leftist publication. Okay, I'm going to take a break. I'm going to come back, and I want to start getting into phone calls with all of you, because I think we've even got somebody who wants to respond to this Girl Scout business, right? Or we did. Yeah, wanted to bring it. Oh, did I steal the thunder? Oh, gee, I didn't mean to do that. Well, we'll be right back. Oh, we got Lori in Davenport, Florida back. I asked, where's Davenport, Florida, Lori?
Hi, Rush. It's just south of Disney.
Oh, okay, cool. Well, welcome. I'm glad that you made it back.
Thank you. Rush, this Thanksgiving, I am so thankful for you. You've been an important part of our family. We pray for you, your staff, and your families. We love you dearly.
Well, I thank you. You don't know how much that means. I truly appreciate it. Thank you.
You are a member of our family. Rush, I'm 55, and I never thought I would see the day. I know sometimes we want to grab onto the little scandals on the other side and pray that this is the moment where they finally get what's coming to them. But I have never seen these top-tier people, the Democrats, the media people, Hollywood, the Disney guy, the hypocrisy of all this. They're frauds, and their own are having to report on it, and I'm watching them eat their own. And doesn't it prove President Trump correct? They're all fake. They're all frauds. These go-to people that have been lecturing me my whole life, I used to listen to them. I thought they were the smartest people. How do they survive it? I don't understand it. And let me say, too, I used to listen to them until I found you, and I have my husband to thank for that.
Me, too. Thank you, Lori's husband.
I was so happy. You know, I'll never forget when we heard you for the first time. My mouth fell open. In fact, I nearly delivered our son in the car early. I was laughing so hard.
Whoa. That could be good or bad. I'll take it as a compliment.
It's a compliment.
Well, you know, it's an interesting question. What is going to happen to these people? You know, behind the scenes, that reclamation projects are underway. Like CBS is going to try to find a way to get Charlie Rose back, and Bloomberg is going to try to find a way to get him back. No, don't see the guys on the other side of the glass are shaking their head. No way, they went too far. They're going to try to find ways to bring him back. They're going to try to. They have to for the sake of the movement. They can't let these guys end up being the legacy and the faces of liberal media and all. But look, it's a fascinating question. I myself have been asking, where does this bottom out, and how do they deal with it? And I'm not yet certain that I know. But look, hang on, Lori. One more thing on this. Okay, back to Lori in Davenport, Florida, which is near Disney. So what do you think is going to happen? What do you think is going to happen to these guys, the media people you mentioned? I guarantee you think it's odd when I say that they're going to bring Charlie Rose back, or try to. They're trying to hold on to Al Franken. They're doing everything they can to hold on to Al Franken. They're doing everything they can to hold on to John Conyers. They're doing everything they can. So what do you think voters are going to do in response to this?
Well, these same people are also up in age. It also shows how irrelevant and out of touch they are. I don't see that they have a bench. I can't imagine. For the first time in my life, I feel like they are in deep panic with the Clintons, what's coming out with this uranium scandal. That's another thing. How does Mueller survive this? Because he's attached to this as well. He's got to know that the FBI informant's coming out. I think it feels like it's all imploding at once.
I don't think they ever see things this way. I don't think this. I've noticed this my entire career. You have just described what would be a natural human reaction if it were you and me that were caught up in these scandals. But that's not how these people think. They, in their minds, Lori, they have the power to massage this or change this to look like anything else, something else, anything other than something that indicts them or encompasses them. I don't think they worry about this at all. I think their strategizing is all calculation. Like I said yesterday, they're not worried that things are imploding on the Clintons. If anything, they're happy about it. They want the Clintons gone. Precisely as you mentioned, the lack of a bench. The Clintons' scandals can't be massaged any longer, but the Clintons have served their purpose. I'm sure that Robert Mueller doesn't give a second of a thought at any time to any trouble he's in. In his mind, he's the one with the power to destroy people. And at some point, he's going to try. At some point, he's going to lower the boom. At some point, Mueller is going to try to take Trump out. Robert Mueller's not running around thinking, "Oh my God, I'm indicted. I might be part of this uranium one thing." In their minds, they've got the power to keep everybody's focus and attention away from it. They own the court system. They don't feel vulnerable. It's not part of who they are. They don't approach these things this way. In their minds, they never are out of control. In their minds, they are never out of power. And one of the reasons is they've always got the media. The media can always bend and shape anything to a favorable position or outcome for people on the left. Now let's get Lori, thanks for the call. I really appreciate it, and I'm flattered to no end of your kind comments at the beginning of your call. But let's get down and dirty on no, wrong phrase, not down and dirty. What I mean is let's really examine some of these allegations and complaints of the behavior of some of these liberal men, both in media and in politics and in entertainment, the way they have treated these women. Now, I have always made the point on this program in my anti-feminist screeds and so forth that, in my view, in a civilized society, in my view, it's always been women who hold all the cards, the women who actually have the power. I don't mean in the power to destroy or the power to control. I'm talking about literally in terms of control of circumstances. Women and the pursuit of women is what makes the world go round, and it always has. That and the pursuit of money. This is not sexist. This is not anything negative. And what I mean by in a civilized society where a woman says no, you obey. A woman says no, okay. You don't force yourself. You don't deny. Woman says no. You ask her to marry her. She says no. You don't go ahead and schedule a wedding and drag her there by the hair and make the priest do it. She says no. It's no. First date, kiss, anything more, whatever she says goes. In a civilized society, these guys are not civilized. These guys are not what I'm talking about. These guys forced themselves on women who did not have any power precisely because these were not romantic circumstances. These were office, workspace, business scenarios. And these guys telling us all these years that they're the sensitive ones and that they're the ones with compassion and tolerance and all that other left-wing gooey stuff, totally wrong. These are nothing but mean, power-mad, rude, extreme people who are not nice, have no manners. It cuts down to nothing more complicated than that. And so these guys that are all caught up in all of this. They engage in a kind of behavior that is unacceptable in civilized circumstances. They take advantage of the power they have, and they use it, and they wield it, and they do it to inflict pain. They do it to inflict emotional and psychological suffering. And who are these guys? Well, before all this happened, these are the people we think are cool. These are the people we're told are hip. These are the people we're told that understand women and women's issues, and they respect women, and they're good feminists and all this, and nothing could be further from the truth. And this is exposing so much about who these guys really are, who these people really are. Now, I will admit I'm accepting the word of these women, because the men I'm talking about have all willingly left their jobs or have been forced out and did not object, they've not claimed that it's all lies. They're off at sex rehab, or they're still in state of denial to one degree or another. But there's nothing redeeming about these guys. There's nothing about them that would be anything you would want to emulate. Not in a civilized society. And I think a lot of this, if I may delve even deeper, I think part of this is because these guys have struck out with women on their own throughout much of their lives. And this is the only way that they have been able to get attention or affection. And it's not what it is, but in my explanation here, these are guys I think have been rejected time and again. So they've gone into various businesses where they have power, and the power attracts women because the women also want to be in these businesses and succeed in them. But I think this is pretty sick stuff. These guys are, well, there's nothing redeeming about them. But all this time, liberal women have protected them. Liberal women, feminists, have done their best. Something has caused the dam to break now. Don't know what it is. There's obviously a simple, easy explanation for this. But now the truth is coming out about all of these people. And before any of this happened, like Lori said, these were respected people. At some point in your life, you trusted them if they were in the news and reporting the news and telling you what happened. If they were actors or producers, you had respect for their work, but now all that's out the window. And I think we're learning exactly who these people have always been. But make no mistake about it, the Democrat Party is trying to hold on to Al Franken. The Democrat Party is trying to hold on to John Conyers. It's easier to throw a Weinstein overboard. It's easier to throw a Charlie Rose overboard. The CBS is begging the Oprah to come in and replace Charlie Rose until Christmas. They're begging the Oprah to sit in Charlie Rose's chair 2-3 times a week, just until they can figure out who they want to replace Charlie with. Halperin's gone. They didn't take much time. They didn't, on the media side, they didn't take much time. They didn't make much of an effort to save these guys. The word came out and they were gone. But it doesn't mean they're not going to try to rehab them and get them back. It's just like Dan Rather, folks. Dan Rather totally makes up that National Guard story about George W. Bush. Now, CBS didn't rehire him, and neither did ABC or NBC. But he's working, and he's doing news, and he's reporting, and he's a guest on these shows, late-night comedy shows. He's a guest on MSNBC. He is not totally shamed out of the business. The guy broke every rule of journalism. He made it up. He utilized forged documents. He was driven by an agenda to affect the outcome of an election. George W. Bush. He was trying to kick and force George W. Bush out of office. Got caught. And the deans of journalism circled the wagons and tried to protect him. They gave him awards at new dinners, new awards they manufactured just to give him. Because what's at stake here is the movement, the cause, liberalism. And they cannot allow these guys, the Weinsteins, the Charlie Roses, the Mark Halperins, the list is, we're up to 40 guys, and they can't allow these people to become the face or legacy of liberalism. So they're going to have to try to rehab them somehow. They may not get their jobs back, but I'll guarantee you every one of them, down the road, we're going to get stories on how they had to really come to grips with the demons they faced. And they went to rehab, or they went wherever, and they got therapy, and they've come to grips, and they have now offered deep and personal apologies to every woman they abused, offended, harassed, what have you. Those stories are coming. The rehabilitation stories, the I've seen the light, the I saw the light, I have been cleansed. Those stories will happen because the left cannot afford for them not to. I take a break. We'll be back. We will continue in mere moments. I'll give you two more examples. Brian Williams didn't just make things up. Brian Williams put himself in the stories that he made up. The way he made things up was to put himself in stories. Now, NBC suspended him for a period of time while they supposedly wrung their hands in the corporate executive suite, trying to figure out what to do. How do we deal with this? It ought not be anything that takes more than 5 minutes to figure out. The guy is a journalist, he's an anchor, and he's making it up on the NBC Nightly News, and he is making himself a part of the story. There's no decision, but they took 6 months with it, and he's back on the air at MSNBC, anchoring a newscast. Now, don't tell me they don't try to save these people. The New York Times, Glenn Thrush, formerly of the Politico, we had news of him. He's the latest, or one of the latest men to be accused of sexual harassment by women. The New York Times is torn about whether to suspend him and fire him. Vanity Fair, the Times is torn about whether Glenn Thrush should lose his job. They're not torn about whether Roy Moore ought to be drummed out of a campaign. They are not torn about anything when it involves what they consider to be moral depravity on the part of right-wingers. But when it comes to their people, it's a gray area, you know. On the one hand, women are to be believed. We have to believe the women. Well, I don't know. The women in the Glenn Thrush case were a little drunk in the bar, and so was Glenn Thrush. Wait a minute. What happened to women are to be believed? Well, it's a gray area. What about Juanita Broderick? Juanita Broderick, forcible rape Bill Clinton. Do you believe her? Well, I don't know. See? Do not ever doubt me telling you who these people are and how they operate. Back to the phones. Ernesto in Seattle. Welcome, sir. Glad you waited. Great to have you. The EIB Network. Hi.
Happy Thanksgiving, Megaditos, Raj.
Thank you. Same to you.
Hey, I am happy that you touched on the Girl Scouts of America advice to the parents.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah, I feel it's totally stupid and out of focus. The way I see it, they're putting the blame on parents and women that are going through difficult times because of sexual harassment instead of sexual predators.
Well, the Girl Scouts are essentially saying that young girls being hugged by family members sets the stage for being sexually harassed or worse later in life. It's absurd. Yeah. It's absurd. It's not the Girl Scouts of America is advising parents not to let male family members hug these little girls. Why? Because it can lead down the road to the little girl wanting to be hugged by people who aren't her family and who might want more than a hug. And if we condition our little girls to be hugged by family members just for greetings and saying hi when you enter a room, this is absurd. This is trying to affix the blame for a problem where it does not reside and doesn't lie. Another attack on the family, essentially, from the Girl Scouts of America, of all places. Which Obviously, he's been corrupted now by the left as well.
It is, Raj, it is sad to see how the Girl Scouts of America continues to hurt their organization by destroying the basic foundation of our society. They're trying to take away an innocent expression of love from family members. And what is that doing now in present day to all of those women that are suffering?
Bingo.
Because of sexual predators.
Exactly right. And to try to relate or compare the hugs, the greetings of male family members to potential future rapists and muggers. I mean, that is the innocent expression of affectionate love in a family can lead to what this is a sick, sick way of actually ending up blaming the victim when you get right down to it. I don't even know if they see that, but that's essentially what they're doing here, setting up. It is all right. It's going to be okay, folks, because we're here, the EIB Network. We come back with the real story of Thanksgiving, the real story, a tradition here on the Rush Limbaugh program for the last 25 years. Be right back. The views expressed by the host of this program, documented to be almost always right 99.8% of the time, according to the most recent opinion audit from the official opinion auditing firm, the Sullivan Group, in Roseville, California. I don't know how many other people even subject their opinions to audit, but I do mine.
Live from the Southern Command in sunny South Florida, it's Open Line Friday.
800-282-2882 if you want to be on the program. The email address, we check them. What I do is I hunt subject lines, and the address lrushbo at eibnet.us. So the real story of Thanksgiving. It is a tradition on this program. And this is the time of year to me, the holiday season begins, and I think to most people. Excuse me. And this time of year, I just become overwhelmed with so many emotions, memories, and the way I'm built, most of my memories are positive. I think, in my case, when I think of nostalgia or the past, the things that automatically occur to me are pleasant ones. Now, I've got bad memories, everybody does, but they're not the first ones that surface. I think my childhood, memories of my childhood, my first real demonstrable success track in this radio was in Sacramento, California. My first job away from home, Pittsburgh, in the early 70s when the Steelers dynasty was forming, which is why I'm a Steelers fan. Then moving to New York in 1988. None of these things were foreseen. None of these things were objectives. None of these things were goals. I've never been a focused goal setter. To me, that's always been too narrowing. It's been too limiting. I've had wide, broad-based goals, like being the best at whatever I did. I don't mean in things I'm not good at. I mean, I never dreamed of being the best golfer in the world. But, I mean, this is my business, and my objective was to be the most listened to and have that be defined as the best. I didn't want to be said to be the most listened. I didn't want some PR firm or buzz suggesting I wanted it to be legitimate and real. So I went wherever I could to climb the ladder. Well, those were not specific places. I never said I'm going to go to Sacramento, Pittsburgh, Kansas City. I was just open to it. In many cases, they were the only places I could get a job. So it really wasn't a matter of choice. And yet I think about all of these things that happened to me in the past that all led. You've heard people say that they wouldn't change a thing in their past. If they're honest with you, that's what they'll tell you. because you can't anyway, and everything in your past is a factor in defining and determining who you are, the good and the bad. So there's not a thing that I would change. Well, maybe if I actually sat down and thought about it, there would be a couple of things, but on the grand scale, no, because it isn't realistic. So I have all these great memories at this time of year. Some people, these memories occur over and around other events, but for me, it's always the holiday season. And I've got family scattered all over the place now. And are you coming home for Thanksgiving? We're at the stage now where it's changing. Thanksgiving has always been at someone's home, but not anymore. Now it's going to be at a different location. Changes the dynamic. You roll with it, flow with it. Everybody hopes you can make it. Going to try. Don't know, because there are a lot of tugs and a lot of pulls. And sometimes I end up feeling guilty because I can't get everywhere every time. I mean, so I'm feeling a little guilt right now. Even though the memories are positive, and even though the time of year is my favorite, there are still commitments and other things which stand in the way. Now, I'm not complaining about anything, folks. I'm sharing. I don't complain. I don't whine. And you know why? Because I don't know how to deal with it when other people do. I literally don't know what to do when somebody's complaining. Well, I shouldn't say this. Well, no, I'm gracious, but I mean, I don't know how to help them. I don't know what to do. Other than say, oh, gee, that's it. Oh, it's really, oh, man, what a bummer. But I always think if somebody's complaining to me, they're asking me to fix it. And most of the time, it's not the case. They're just venting. But I think I have a responsibility to fix it or to offer a solution. So I struggle. Well, what the hell are they asking me for here? And that's why I don't whine and complain, because I think other people are going to think I'm asking for something. So I hold it all in. And what do I have to complain about anyway? So, but I'm just not good at dealing with other people's complaints. So the way I've dealt with it, they're just venting. And they're not expecting me to have the solution. And then if they are, I'll find out. It takes me to the true story of Thanksgiving. It was written about in Chapter 6 of See, I Told You So, Book 2. It's the chapter titled Dead White Guys, or What the History Books Never Tell You. And this chapter, by the way, served as the foundation for the first book in the Rush Revere series, Rush Revere and the Brave Pilgrims, where in addition to the true story of Thanksgiving, we have the true story of the Pilgrims, who they were, where they came from, why they came, what happened when they got here, what they had to do to fix what went wrong when they got here, and what role the Pilgrims play in the overall founding of America. Rush Revere and the Brave Pilgrims, that's the first book of 5 in the Rush Revere Time Travel Adventures with Exceptional American series, which is written for young people. Why did the Pilgrims risk everything to get on a rickety little ship? Compared to ships and boats today, it was a rickety little thing. They traveled the Atlantic Ocean to a place that was foreign and unknown, and they were on a boat that the last thing about it was pleasant or luxury. They had no idea what they were going to encounter, but it had to be better than what they were fleeing. And what they were fleeing was religious persecution. Now, the real story of Thanksgiving, I wasn't even taught the whole version. Like everybody, I was taught a sanitized modern version that has elements of political correctness and multiculturalism in it. I was taught that Thanksgiving was about the Pilgrims being saved from starvation and deprivation by the loving, good-hearted, compassionate, and caring stewards of the earth, the Indians. The Pilgrims didn't know how to grow corn, food, maize, popcorn, anything of the sort when they got here. The Indians showed them all of that. And Thanksgiving was the Pilgrims inviting the Indians over for dinner to thank the Indians for saving them, the Native Americans. Everybody's been taught a version of that. But, ladies and gentlemen, it isn't true. The story of the Pilgrims begins in the early part of the 17th century. For those of you in Rio Linda, that would be the 1600s. The Church of England under King James was persecuting anybody and everybody who did not recognize its absolute civil and spiritual authority. The government was God. The government was the religion. The government was the church. And those who challenged that, those who believed strongly in freedom of worship, were hunted down. They were imprisoned and sometimes executed for their religious beliefs in 1600s England. So a group of separatists, people that didn't want any part of this, they'd have it their limit, first fled to Holland. That's right, the Pilgrims did not come on the same route as the Titanic. They didn't come from England. They fled to Holland, and they established a community there. And after 11 years, 40 of them agreed to make the journey to what was then called the New World, where they knew they would certainly face hardships. But the promise was that they could live and worship God according to the dictates of their own consciences. The belief in freedom of religion to engage in this kind of activity in order to be able to do it, to be able to cross an ocean to a place you have no idea what to expect, just to be able to worship as you choose. So August 1st, 1620, the Mayflower set sail. There were 102 passengers, including 40 pilgrims. The whole ship was not pilgrims, 40 of them. They were led by a man named William Bradford. And on the journey, Bradford set up an agreement, a contract, that established, well, what it was socialism. Just and equal laws for all members of the new community, quote, unquote, irrespective of their religious beliefs. Where did the revolutionary ideas expressed in the Mayflower Compact come from? These are religious people. They came from the Bible. The Pilgrims were a people that were completely steeped in the lessons of the Old and New Testaments. And the Pilgrims looked to the ancient Israelites for their example, and because of the biblical precedents in Scripture, they didn't doubt their experiment would work. They were people with incredible faith. The journey to the New World was long. It was arduous. When they landed in New England in November, according to Bradford's journal, they found a cold, barren, desolate wilderness. No friends to greet them, no dock, no Motel 6, no gas stations, no strip, nothing, rocks and coastline, no houses. There were no hotels, no inns, and the sacrifice they had made for freedom was just beginning. During the first winter, half of them died, including William Bradford's own wife, of either starvation, sickness, or exposure. When spring finally came, Indians, Native Americans, did indeed teach the settlers how to plant corn, how to fish for cod, skin beavers for coats. Life improved for the Pilgrims, but they didn't prosper. Not yet. Now, this is important to understand because this is where modern American history lessons end. This is what the modern Thanksgiving story is. Pilgrims show up, don't know what they're doing, nothing for them, no place to stay. They're starving. The Indians fed them, showed them how to feed themselves and make coats and stay warm, and Thanksgiving happened. That's not the story. That's not why the Pilgrims gave thanks. That's not why George Washington proclaimed the first Thanksgiving holiday. The Indians did indeed help them, and they learned how to plant corn, and they had a big feast. And we celebrate that today. But Thanksgiving is actually explained in textbooks as a holiday for which the Pilgrims gave thanks to the Indians for saving their lives rather than what it was. The Pilgrims' Thanksgiving was a thanks to God for helping them in their belief in Him and Scripture, into arranging their affairs and forming their colony in a way that ultimately they could survive. And if you doubt this, go look at George Washington's first Thanksgiving proclamation when Thanksgiving became a national holiday. And I've got it here, and I might even share excerpts from it before we're through here today. But let me move on. You cannot escape the fact that Thanksgiving was a national holiday rooted in thanking God for America. That was George Washington's purpose. Thanksgiving was to thank God for America, for everything that had happened leading to the founding of America. Everything. Washington and many of the founders felt divine inspiration throughout the entire period of time following the Pilgrims' arrival. Now, here's the part that's been omitted from the textbooks. Remember that original contract that the Pilgrims all signed aboard the Mayflower? Well, they had merchant sponsors. They didn't have any money. They had people paying them, sponsoring their trip. They didn't have the money to make the trip themselves. These sponsors were in Holland and London. They had to be repaid. So that contract called for everything the Pilgrims produced to go into a common store, a single bank account, if you will. And each member of the community was entitled to an equal share of the gross. This was fair. This was equal. This was same. All the land they cleared, the houses they built, they belonged to the community as well. Nobody owned anything. Everything was owned by the community. Everybody equal share to all of it. They were going to distribute it equally. Everybody would get the same. Everybody would be the same. All the land they cleared, the houses they built belonged to the community. Nobody owned anything. It was a commune. It was Humboldt County, California, minus the weed. They even had organic vegetables. Now, William Bradford, who had become the new governor of the colony, recognized that this wasn't working. They weren't making any money to pay off the sponsors. But you know what else was happening? Since everybody got an equal share no matter what, there were some lazy sloths. Yes, some of the original Pilgrims, some of their offspring just sat around and did nothing all day while the others picked up the slack. And Bradford originally, or at least at some point, saw this isn't going to work. And so they essentially tore up that first contract, which they didn't know it, but that was socialism. And what they did was create a new community based on what we would call capitalism today. The more you produce, the more you got to keep. The harder you work, the greater were the fruits of your labors. If you wanted a bigger home than somebody else, you could afford to build it, you did it. You didn't have to share it. And this change unleashed everything, and the Pilgrims became a going economic concern. And they experienced economic plenty far greater than any they had had under the previous Mayflower contract arrangement. Bradford writes about all of this in his journal, and it is for this that the original Pilgrims gave thanks. Not to the Indians saving them, but to God for helping them to survive and thrive in a place none had ever been. I take a break. There's more to this, though. Hang on. We'll be right back and continue after this. Okay, folks, now here's where this gets good. William Bradford, the governor of the colony, after abandoning the original compact and then converting to, hey, you can keep what you earn and earn as much as you produce, and so when free enterprise was turned loose, In Bradford's Journal, this had very good success, for it made all hands industrious, so as much more corn was planted than otherwise would have been. In other words, they had economic growth. They had prosperity because there was personal incentive rather than everybody getting a share of what others, some, none, everybody else produced. And so the Pilgrims found that they had more food than they could eat themselves. Now, this is where what you've been told about Thanksgiving enters the picture. The Indians had more than they could share, more than they could eat, more food than they could serve each other. They invited the Indians. They set up trading posts. They exchanged goods with the Indians. And the profits finally allowed them to pay off the debts to the sponsors, the merchants in London and Holland who had sponsored them. But it was the sharing of the bounty that was created by the change in governing structure that led to the plenty that allowed them to invite the Indians and share all of this with them. That's the story most people get, but they've been mistaught that the Indians provided all the food because the Pilgrims are incapable. It is the exact opposite. Now, there's just one more element of this, the true story of Thanksgiving. You may or may not have heard of the Great Puritan Migration. That is what happened after the Pilgrims' original 2 or 3 years setting up shop. Now, this is fundamentally important to understand. The Great Pilgrim Migration occurred because of the overwhelming success at growing their community. The word of what the Pilgrims had done spread. I mean, there were ships going back and forth, New World to England and Europe all the time. And word spread of this newfound prosperity, of this new world, of the new opportunities, of the religious freedom and other freedoms that had been created after the arrival of the Pilgrims. Had none of that happened, had the real story of Thanksgiving been that the Pilgrims were a decrepit bunch out of place and didn't know how to take care of themselves, and if it weren't for the Indians, they would have died, there would have been no reason for anybody to follow them. It would have been judged a failure. But it was anything but. And it's not taught today. But the fact of the matter is that the Pilgrims, they were not ideologues. It wasn't that somebody said, we're going to try socialism. It's just the way they set it up. They wanted to be fair with everybody. It was a natural thing. We'll have a common store. Everybody has one share, and everything we do and make goes into that bank, and everybody gets an equal percentage of it. Well, human nature interceded. And there were some lazy people, didn't do anything. They didn't have to. They were entitled to an equal share no matter what they did. That didn't work very long. They set up free enterprise where the fruits of your labor determined what you got, what you had, and what you're able to do. And it formed the basis of forming the basic arrangements they had as a community. Well, it was so successful, and that's what they gave thanks for. These were deeply religious people. They were giving thanks for having been shown the light. And the word spread, and that began the Great Puritan Migration, and that's when the flood of European arrivals began, after the success of the original Plymouth colony. That's never taught, is part of the original Thanksgiving story. And now you know it. And every year we pass this on because the audience always has new members each and every, well, not just year, each and every month, every day. Okay, Joe, age 13 in Toledo, Ohio. I'm glad you called. It's great to have you with us on the program today. How are you?
Good. How are you doing, Rush?
I'm very well. Thank you, Joe.
Yep. So I'm here, and I wanted to just say how awesome I thought your book was. I read my first book of yours, the Rush for the Year series of the Pilgrims. My grandma, who's been listening to you for about 15 years, just told me about it, and I thought it was great.
That's your grandmother told you about it. You thought it was great. Well, that is great. I thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. I just learned about the Pilgrims in school, and I go Toledo Christian. But yeah, it goes so much in depth with the Pilgrims, and there's a lot of things that I didn't learn about in school that I learned about in your book, like William Bradford and Miles Standish. Sorry. We just kind of learned the outline at school, but then when you read your book, it just goes deep, and we learn like the real facts about it.
Well, you have no idea how much you are making my day. This is one of the greatest book reviews that we've ever had. You've done a better book review than I could have done, and I wrote it. Joe, this is. Do you have all the books, or have you just read the first one?
I just read the first one.
Oh, well, I'll tell you what. If you'll hang on, we have the Revere office would love to send you the other books, some CDs, the audio version of each book, and some other goodies too. So if you'll hang on, Mr. Snerdley will get your shipping, your mailing address, and we'll try to get this stuff out ASAP, like sometime next week. But he's exactly right. So he wouldn't know if he hadn't read the book. But all of the original Thanksgiving story is kind of glossed over, with the fundamental point being, and look, from the multicultural standpoint, you kind of understand it. I mean, the multiculturalists have taken over the school curricula. And even I, folks, was taught the basic version that the Pilgrims had a tough time of it. They were new arrivals, and it was not their land, and the Indians were wonderfully nice and compassionate and sharing, and they taught. And it makes for a wonderful story. Makes for a great story, but it isn't anything to do with the first Thanksgiving, which was actually proclaimed by George Washington as President of the United States. The Indians, the Pilgrims, were giving thanks to God for having been given guidance on how to arrange their affairs and to be able to devote themselves to their religion according to their desires, using their freedom. And that was the depth of their gratitude. Now, in Rush, Revere, and the Brave Pilgrims, the reader is taken aboard the Mayflower. We research some things that happened on the Mayflower. These are written for young kids 10 to 13. The Indians and some of the Indian personalities, Squanto and others, are written about in Rush, Revere, and the Brave Pilgrims. And it's a complete story. We use time travel. Rush, Revere, that's me, a high school substitute teacher, has a talking horse that can time travel because of an accident that happened during a lightning strike. And so the horse can go anywhere in American history and take some students from Revere's school, and they actually go back in time to be part of the history. And that's how it's taught rather than just recited as facts and figures. So, Joe, I appreciate that very much. Absolutely fabulous review. We'll have a brief timeout. No, I'm just trying to think if I've got time to squeeze in some of Washington's Thanksgiving proclamation. It might be worthwhile to try that. Hang on just a second. Back in a minute. The George Washington Thanksgiving Proclamation, establishing the national holiday, was October 3rd, 1789. That was the date of the proclamation. Here's how it begins. Whereas it is the duty of, and by the way, let me say something here at the outset. The Pilgrims, George Washington, they're not just distant figures in history. These are the people who, among others, founded this country. This is genuinely awesome. That word's thrown around, but what they did, how they got there, historical. It's not some distant group of people. They are us. Whereas it is the duty of all nations to acknowledge the providence of Almighty God, to obey his will, to be grateful for his benefits, and humbly to implore his protection and favor, And whereas both houses of Congress have, by their joint committee, requested me to recommend to the people of the United States a day of public thanksgiving and prayer to be observed by acknowledging with grateful hearts the many signal favors of Almighty God, especially by affording them an opportunity peaceably to establish a form of government for their safety and happiness. Now, therefore, I do recommend and assign Thursday, the 26th day of November next, to be devoted by the people of these states to the service of that great and glorious being, who is the beneficent author of all the good that was, that is, or that will be, that we may then all unite in rendering unto him our sincere and humble thanks for his kind care and protection of the people of this country previous to their becoming a nation, for the signal and manifold mercies and the favorable interpositions of his providence, which we experienced in the tranquility, union, and plenty which we have since enjoyed, for the peaceable and rational manner in which we have been enabled to establish constitutions of government for our safety and happiness, and particularly the national one now lately instituted for the civil and religious liberty with which we are blessed. This is shortly after the Constitution was official, giving thanks for that as well. And also that we may then unite in most humbly offering our prayers and supplications to the great Lord and ruler of nations, and beseech him to pardon our national and other transgressions, to enable us all, whether in public or private stations, to perform our several and relative duties properly and punctually, and to render our national government a blessing to all the people by constantly being a government of wise, just, and constitutional laws, discreetly and faithfully executed and obeyed, to protect and guide all sovereigns and nations, and to bless them with good government, peace, and concord, to promote the knowledge and practice of true religion and virtue, and the increase of science among them and us, and generally to grant unto all mankind such a degree of temporal prosperity as he alone knows to be best, given under my hand of the city of New York, on the 3rd day of October in the year of our Lord, 1789, George Washington. How many of you have heard that our founders were atheists or were agnostics? So that's the first Thanksgiving. The official proclamation for it has traceable roots right back to the Pilgrims. You know, there's just one other thing here, folks. You probably have been told that we screwed the Indians out of Manhattan Island. We bought Manhattan from them for the equivalent of $24. That also is not true. A persuasive case can be made the city of New York began with a swindle. For generations, school children have been taught that a slick trick was played on unsuspecting Indians by the director of the Dutch West India Company, Peter Minuit. In 1626, he purchased the island of Manhattan for 60 guilders worth of trinkets, about $24. What Minuit did not know at the time was that his real estate deal had been struck with the Canarsie tribe, residents of Long Island. They didn't hold title to Manhattan, which they sold to the Dutch. So in due course, the intruders from Amsterdam, from Holland, who thought they had pulled a sharp swindle on the local Indians, were forced to negotiate a second, more costly deal with the people who actually did own Manhattan. So it was the Dutch who got screwed by the Indians, not the other way around. And I guarantee you haven't been taught that. Yep. Have a great Thanksgiving weekend, folks. A great Thanksgiving with friends, family, however you do it. Hope it is everything that you imagine and expect and more. And we will see you back here on Monday, ready and rev to go.